If you want to know a homeschool, I'll give you a great historical example of somebody who was homeschooled. A man named Ali ibn Abi Talib. He was the Khalifa, the Caliph. He was the fourth Caliph. He was a brilliant man. He was a genius. He grew up in the house of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He never went a day in school. He never spent a day in school. Not one day. Because he was in the greatest school, the school of the Prophet Muhammad. That's the sunnah. For Muslims, sunnah is the tradition of their Prophet. Their Prophet was a homeschooler. He schooled his children, Fatima. When the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was 12 years old, imagine this, he took a trip with his uncle to Syria of a month, a commerce trip, a trip as a merchant, 12 years old. And look at our 12-year-olds today. Look at them. It's disgraceful. It's disgraceful, really. Look at these poor kids, and they're victims, and you have to see them as victims. And we're complicit in the crime that was done against them because we're more busy making a living, and we've forgotten we've already been given a life. We've been given a life by God. And your children are your wealth. Al-malu wal-banun zinatul hayat ad-dunya. Children, wealth and children are the ornaments, the embellishments of life on earth. But to sacrifice your children for your wealth, if I had to give up one of the two, I know which one I'd give up. And I don't have that much to give up, so it's a lot easier choice than it is for some people out there. We need to retake our communities, really. You need to stop buying these at these corporate, really, don't buy from them. Don't wear the logos. Don't wear the Nike swoosh. Why should you give them free advertisement if they're not going to pay you? Seriously, why advertise for them? Take them off their clothes, or don't buy their clothes, make your own clothes. People used to make their own clothes. You can buy cloth, go buy cloth, learn how to sew. Sewing's a good thing to learn how to do. Well, I'm going to feel stupid walking around in homemade clothes. Well, who do you think made you feel stupid? The same people trying to sell you those clothes that they made that look a lot stupider than homemade clothes. We've got kids walking with pants halfway down their bottoms, with shoes that are so big. Some of these young girls walking around, my God, how do they walk? And we know it's bad for their spines. Really, all of this is madness. You're not the mad one. But if you have enough sense of who you are and whose you are, you have some individuality, you have some spine, you have some courage to be different. It takes courage to be different. People ask me, every time they say, what about your children being homeschooled? What about socialization? I said, that's why we're homeschooling. For God's sakes, get that through your brains. That's why I'm homeschooling. I don't want them socialized into that madness. It amazes me, that question always comes. What about, so every single person I've ever said, that's it. I don't want, my children, I look out there, I see these kids the same age, they scare me. When I was a little kid, and I did some Huckleberry Finn things that I'm probably a little ashamed of, but when I was a little kid, if an adult looked at me with any type of disdain, I felt fear. I'll tell you something, I feel fear looking at these 8-year-olds. I really do. And one of them broke a bottle in front of my house, and I went outside and I said to him, hey, excuse me, what are you doing? He said, what's it to you, man? This kid was 10 years old. If I had said that when I was 10 years old in Mill Valley, California, that man would have taken off his belt and whipped me, and my mother would have thanked him for doing that. It wasn't called child abuse in those days. Al Capone, one of the worst criminals in the history of America, according to the history books, was thrown out of school when he was 12 years old for punching a teacher in the mouth. Al Capone, he didn't bring a knife to school and knife his teacher. He didn't shoot him. He punched him in the mouth, and he was the worst kid on the block. Al Capone went on to have an extraordinary career in crime. But he was a clever fellow. People don't realize that Al Capone probably did more for the people of Chicago than most of the multinational corporations that are centered in Chicago. He opened up soup kitchens and fed poor people that didn't. They loved him, Al Capone. You know why they got angry at him? Poor old Al, right? You know why they got angry at him? They loved Al. They really did. You can read the history. Al Capone at his trial, when they mentioned that he actually wore, they had somebody up there who made his underwear. Homemade underwear. Al Capone was a rich guy. He wore homemade clothes. That's what rich people do. They don't, you think rich people are buying that stuff at the Gap? Rich people they pay somebody to make their own clothes. They eat organic produce, right? Really, they do. They eat from homemade bowls. They don't buy mass-produced stuff. You can make your own bowls. Rich people, they're too busy ruining the world to make their own bowls, so they pay other people to make their own bowls. But the point is, they don't eat from mass-produced things. The wealthiest people don't. They really don't. Al Capone, when it was mentioned that he wore silk underwear, blushed. That's what the reporter said. In other words, the man had some shame in his heart. We didn't even see Clinton blush. The President of the United States, when he lied to the American people, didn't even blush. Al Capone blushed because his underwear was mentioned. When Clinton's private parts were mentioned, not his underwear, mind you, his private parts, the man didn't blush. What does that tell you about Al Capone and the President of the United States? Well, I'll tell you something. It tells me that I think Al Capone was probably a better person. Really, I think he probably had something in his heart that gave him a sense of shame, despite the fact he was a horrific human being. The reason the Chicago people went against Al Capone is because he killed 7 men, allegedly. It wasn't the killing of the gangsters. They could care less. You know what really upset them? He had his cronies dress as policemen. That's where Al went too far. That's what really troubled them. The idea of a police officer being a mafioso. In other words, it was too much, even for the people of Chicago. 7 people, and the people of Chicago were up in arms. We have 7 people being killed every hour in Chicago now. Really? I mean, look what's going on out there, and people they're no longer shocked at these things. My mother told me, who grew up in the 1930s in San Francisco, California, that if a person died, it was front page news for at least a month. If a person was killed, murdered, it was front page news for at least a month. Why have we allowed this to happen? Really, something very, very wrong has happened, and what it is that your souls are dying. We're literally dying of suffocation, spiritual suffocation. Our souls are dying. And before the lights are out completely, I would advise all of you to reject this and to commit your lives to turning the tide. Because the danger of people that can see things another way and have the courage and the motivation to set out to change those is that very often they succeed. That's why those people are dangerous. People that can see things the way they should be and not the way they are. Those people are dangerous people. And I hope I'm a dangerous man. I really do. I hope I'm a dangerous man, and I hope all of you will commit to being dangerous people. A danger to what's wrong out there. A danger to what is wrong out there. And I'll tell you something, you can begin it. If you look in here, if the average person in here even has 2 children, and they raise them to break the cycle, to be different, to reject it, that can change the history of Toronto. Really. It can change the history of Toronto, and Toronto can change the history of Canada. And this is the way it begins. It begins with an understanding of the power of 1, because 1 is the greatest number. It is the greatest number. It's God's number. It's a powerful number, and an idea can change hearts. An idea can change hearts, and if an idea is right and it's true, it should change hearts. And if it's not, it shouldn't. But we're being bombarded by people who have the power now to inflict on us ideas that are dangerous to our hearts. And they're doing it to our children. So my advice to all of you, is to turn off your commercial televisions. This is a first and major step in changing the conditions of your households. Turn off and this is an act of courage. It's an act of courage. It's the coward that allows others to amuse himself. You see, and I agree wholeheartedly. I once heard somebody say that they'd never been bored in their life. And it always troubled them when they heard people say, I'm bored. Children learn boredom. I've never seen my children bored. I've never heard them say I'm bored. I haven't heard that. I haven't seen that. Let them run around and do what they want. You put them in a classroom for 8 hours a day in training and preparation to living a life of sitting behind a computer terminal for 8 hours a day, being bored stiff, and think that this is life. No, there are alternatives out there, people. Be creative. Be creative. There's alternatives. It doesn't have to be this way. And if that's the only message that you take from tonight, it's enough. It does not have to be this way. We have the power and the ability to change, and we have to do that. We have to change, and we have to listen to our hearts. Our prophet, peace be upon him, said, listen and take advice from your heart, even if others give you advice. What is your heart telling you about what you see out there? If it's not telling you that something's seriously wrong, then as a cardiologist, I would say your heart's dead. I'm not a cardiologist, I'm actually a cardiac nurse. So I spend a lot of time with cardiologists, and a cardiologist will tell you your heart's dead if it's not registering any movement. If there's nothing moving in the heart, it's dead. The physical heart and the spiritual heart. And if your heart is dead, then know, like the Quran says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحْيِي الْأَرْضَ بَعْدَ مَوْتِهَا. God brings life to the earth after its death. And our scholars say the earth here also means the human heart. Our children's hearts can be brought back to life. It's going to take some serious measures. Resuscitation, sometimes defibrillation. But it can be done. They can be brought back to life because humans are amazing. They have awakenings. I had a car accident. That's what brought me out of a sleep that I was in. I had a very powerful car accident. And I was confronted with my own mortality. And that's why they don't want to tell you about death. They don't want to let you think about death. They want to fill your lives with empty songs. They'll replace real friends for friends on a TV sitcom that know nothing about you, that don't care whether you live or die. If you want to know if you live in a community, then somebody said the best way to assess that is ask yourself, will the person at the grocery store realize, if you happen to drop dead today, that you're no longer buying groceries there? That's how you know if you have any community whatsoever. Will the person that you buy gas from, will the person that does this or that for you, will they even remember that you were a person in their life? Because that's what's been taken away from people. We need community. We need community. We are communal beings. We're beings of community. Every religious tradition, the Sangha of the Buddhists, the Ummah of the Muslims, the Ecclesia of the Christians, every religious tradition has a sense of community, of bringing people together. And we're difficult to be with each other. You have to set aside differences sometimes. We're hard to be together. That's part of being human. It's learning to deal with that obstinate person over there and that contrarian over there. And you could be the contrarian yourself. And they're having a hard time dealing with you. But that's what life is about. It's about setting aside differences for a greater good. Coming together, listening to each other. We were at a poetry recital in New Mexico, and we had a spectacular night. Everybody read a poem, and we had a beautiful night at Darul Islam with all these teachers. And when we finished, I said that I would just like to have a moment of silence, I think, or a prayer for all those people out there watching television right now, who are deprived of the joy of human companionship, of sharing poems together, of sharing thoughts together. And you know what? A man came up to me after he was a teacher, and he was almost in tears. He said to me, when you said that, I just realized something. I've been spending the last 20 years of my life in front of a TV set every night, And this is the best time that I've had. And it's not, don't let it happen at Borders. Don't let them co-opt that. Because they'll do it. They'll tell you, come down and have a poetry thing, and we'll even give you Borders poetry thing, and you can advertise us on the thing. Make your own coffee houses. Really, be people of creativity. Hadith of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, in which a group of men went out, and he put one of the men as an emir over the others, which is a leader on this journey. This man, he's probably a humorous fellow, he told his companions, see that fire? I'm commanding you to jump into the fire. And they looked at each other and they said, the whole reason we became Muslims was to save ourselves from the fire. So we're not going to do it. He said, I'm the emir, I'm the ruler. They said, well, let's go back and ask the Prophet of God. So they went back to the Prophet ﷺ, and they told him the story, and he said, لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق. Never obey a creature if it means disobeying the Creator. Never obey a creature if it means disobeying the Creator. And I would put forth that we're in gross disobedience of natural laws. Laws that are part of nature. We're in a state of disobedience and we need to atone. Really, we need to redeem ourselves. All of these things that are happening on this planet, I believe that we live in a moral universe, that there's reasons these things are happening. There's reasons why the ozone has a hole in it. There's reasons why the weather is no longer like it used to be. There's reasons why you don't see birds and bees anymore in many parts of our lands. There's reasons why our forests are disappearing. There's reasons why our lakes are poison and toxic. There's reason why our food now kills 20,000 people in the United States every year. 20,000 people. More than was killed in a year in Vietnam in their own war statistics are dying from the food they're eating. There's reasons for all these things because we're out of balance and we've forgotten what the heavens are. The heavens are order, and we need to bring that order down here. And there are many ways to do that. I'm a Muslim and I'm committed to Islam, but there's people in here that have their wisdom traditions. And if those wisdom traditions are working for them, then the Quran says, Ya ahl al-kitab, lastum ala shay' hatta tuqimu at-Tawrata wal-Injil. O people of the book, you're not on anything until you practice your Torah, until you practice your gospel. Guidance has been given to humanity. Really, guidance has been given. And everybody agrees on certain basic things except the control paradigm out there. They're the only ones that don't agree. And the majority of people in Canada and America, the majority of people, according to the dominant paradigm statistics, believe in God, believe in an afterlife. So why aren't these things ever even discussed in our public schools? Why aren't they even discussed? So my advice to all of you, really, don't obey any creatures if it means disobeying your Creator. And if you want to know what disobedience to your Creator is, the Prophet said, disobedience to your Creator is what doesn't feel right in your heart. Listen to your heart. Listen to your heart.